Okay, we're going to jump right into our quiz number one. Psychological egoism is discussed on page 63. If you take a look there, it should be pretty clear that that's the definition. It tells us that people are so motivated such that they, in fact, pursue their own self-interest. This is really a claim about altruism, and that would be the opposite of egoism. Emotivism, that is discussed around page 36 and 37, and we see on 37 there's this fairly straightforward discussion about the emotivist view of moral language, where they tell us that despite the subject-predicate nature of moral claims that we make, which make it look like moral language states fact, indeed they're not. Moral language does a different kind of thing than making claims about the world that could be true or false. Actually, it just is a way of expressing our attitudes. Yay, boo, hooray, I like it, I don't like it. And those aren't really true or false or aiming to state facts. So there's a particular view of moral language that underlies emotivism. So this is the opposite claim. This is exactly what emotivism is saying is wrong way to see moral language. And of course, people debate these things, but that is the emotivist claim pretty straightforwardly laid out on 37. So, problems with the divine command theory. This is straightforwardly discussed as the second problem on page 52. Second problem with the divine command theory. There's three described there, and for reasons discussed, it surprisingly would make God's commands arbitrary. That doesn't seem quite right. So now we're on the doctrine of ethical egoism. If we're able to keep ethical egoism separate from psychological egoism, we've got two questions down pretty well here. So being an ethical theory, it's telling us what people ought or ought not to do, and we can see this is the one that clearly states a view of what we ought to do, namely that we ought to exclusively pursue our own interests. That might seem like a weird moral theory, and indeed many people think it is, but that's the view. This is psychological egoism, again, so we wouldn't want to confuse it with that. So, there's that. So 5, despite relying on an unsound argument, one lesson of relativism, still maybe something we can say about it, is that there is some danger of assuming that all of our preferences are based on an absolute moral standard. That comes out stated pretty clearly in the chapter on relativism. That's just straightforwardly given to us on page 29 of the text there. So go with that. One strength of the divine command theory is here. That solves the old problem of objectivity in ethics. And that's stated pretty clearly in the reading. It might face other problems, but it does pretty clearly give us an objective ground for morality. It's not just about what you feel or what culture does. There's a real solid ground to moral claims that transcend culture and all that. So Hume's criticism of natural law theory, you can get that starting on page 53 going forward, is here, no conclusion about what ought to be the case can ever be inferred from statements about what is the case. See that pretty clearly in the text. So here we get a question about morality in general, and in particular why Rachel thinks moral judgments need to be backed by reasons. This is right out of the text here, and that seems like a pretty bold claim, but that's what he says. I'm not sure I agree with that. It sounds optimistic, but that would be the reason he gives for why moral judgments must be backed by reason.